Welcome to the big show. It is Paul Zeise. Obviously, it is the big show. We call it every day. Usually we do it at 5. Today we had to do it at 4 because we have some other conflicts that we have to get rid of and take care of. But we've got a lot to get to, so we're going to get right down to the brass tacks. I've heard a lot over the last 24 hours, people talking about what Art Rooney said to the media yesterday. And one of the things that he said was he really believes that the way to go about winning in the playoffs is still running the football. And I honestly think that is about as delusional of a take as there possibly could be. Now, of course, in the last 24 hours, many Steeler fans who are looking for reasons to basically be optimistic and all that other stuff, they are basically trying to talk themselves into, well, the Steelers can be just like the Eagles. Correct me if I'm wrong, and I could be, but the Steelers don't have Saquon Barkley on their team, nor do they have the best offensive line in football, nor do they have anybody as good as A.J. Brown. And I don't care what anyone says about George Pickens. A.J. Brown is what George Pickens could be or should be, but isn't because he's immature. They don't have a quarterback like Jalen Hurts, although they do with Justin Fields, with this caveat. When it comes to Jalen Hurts, guess what? What they do have is Kellen Moore, an offensive coordinator who knows what to do with Jalen Hurts. And they run a very much an RPO type offense that is built on the talents of the quarterback. They don't ask him to drop back and do all kinds of crazy things. He can. He throws it, reasonably well. But they weren't afraid to run him a bunch. They're not afraid to use RPOs. They're not afraid to use quarterback runs and read options and all the other stuff because they understand that's his strength. So my point is, if you don't have Saquon Barkley, all of a sudden, guess what? Your running game is not explosive. And if you're confused, all you need to do is watch these playoff games and see that when Saquon Barkley touches the ball, he's a threat to go 60, 70 yards every single time. And part of it is because they have to account for Jalen Hurts running the football. They have to account for that read option. They have to account for, him, an RPO where he tucks it in and pulls it back and throws it somewhere, whatever. At the end of the day, the Steelers don't scare anybody that way. So, when I look at it, the other part of it is the Eagles are one of the, their defense is much better than the Steelers. It actually shows up when it needs to show up. It doesn't talk about being the big bad Eagles. They actually are pretty good on defense, and that helps as well. So this comparison that people want to make to, well, maybe the Steelers can be the Eagles. The Eagles are such an outlier when it comes to how you win in football these days. And I would even say this. There's nothing about the Eagles in terms of the way they actually run their offense that is a throwback. Teams weren't playing the way the Eagles are in the 70s. The Steelers want to play the way the teams played in the 70s. They want to line up with a fullback if they can get away with it and try and, power run and go 3 yards in a cloud of dust. That's what they're looking for. The Eagles are looking for big chunk plays out of their running game. It's completely different. It's not even in the same category of what the Steelers are trying to do. So, this delusion that I've been hearing from Steeler fans who are, to use Mike Tomlin's phrase, seeking comfort, it's silly. Unless you're going to tell me that there's another edition of Saquon Barkley out there and Arthur Smith is suddenly going to change into something he isn't, I don't know what we're talking about. And the offensive line is going to become the best offensive line in football. I don't even know what we're talking about. But it's a horrible comparison. It's just one of these things that it becomes a talking point, because again, here's how these things develop. Art Rooney says, well, I still think that the way that you can win is by, the way that you win is by running the football. Then it becomes, most people say, well, it's a passing league. Nobody wants to do that. And of course, then the response is, well, look at the Eagles. A, the Eagles are an outlier. B, the way they're playing is not the way Art Rooney's talking about playing. C, they're an outlier because they have exactly the right skill set to do what they do. And guess what? Jalen Hurts they've basically committed to, he might get hurt. It's part of it. But we're going to use him and use his legs in a way that a lot of teams are afraid to. I mean, really, the thing about it, and it's the same thing with the Ravens. I mean, they run Lamar Jackson. Same thing with the Bills. They run Josh Allen. So, if you're going to build an offense that way, the new running game is involving a quarterback and involving RPOs and involving read option plays and, quarterback draws and quarterback runs and rollouts and all the other stuff. It's incorporating all of that because you're looking for chunk plays out of your run game, just like chunk plays out of your passing game. It's an explosive league. And most of the time, honestly, I would love to know how many times teams go, 13, 14 plays and score touchdowns. Because most of the time, there's usually a really big play in these touchdown drives. I'm just saying it makes no sense to me to try and compare what the Steelers are trying to do or say they're trying to do to the Eagles. Because, again, the Eagles, the Ravens, the Bills, those teams that are winning that way, they're using quarterback run, one. And two, they all have offensive coordinators that are innovative, creative, and willing to try some other things instead of trying to basically run, a very conservative offense where we're going to control the ball and control the clock and all that stuff. The Eagles aren't looking to go 15-play drives and control the clock. You know what they're looking to do? Score touchdowns. And the way they do that is by handing the ball to Saquon Barkley, throwing the ball to Saquon Barkley, or having Jalen Hurts use Saquon Barkley and then go the other way, for 20 yards himself. So that brings you to the Steelers. If you're going to tell me that they're going to play with Justin Fields, I might listen to that for a little bit. But here's what I'm not going to listen to. I don't believe that Justin Fields, behind that offensive line, unless they do something with the tackles that I don't know what they're going to do, with Arthur Smith calling the plays and running back X in the backfield, I don't think he's going to become Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. I don't think he becomes that guy. I think he becomes a good enough player, which is what he was, the 6 games he played this year. And, maybe they are able to win 9 or 10 games, but they're not beating anybody in the playoffs of anyone good playing that way unless they have an upgrade, starting with their offensive philosophy and their offensive coordinator, period. And if they don't have that, what are we talking about? That is just really what it comes to. And I think that's what you have to do. And I think that really when it comes down to, the RPO offense that we're talking about or the read option stuff, it's kind of the wave of what's going on in the NFL. And they're doing it in a way that takes advantage of the quarterback play that's coming out of college. For a while there, the quarterbacks coming out of college were almost useless in the NFL because the NFL was still looking for the 6'5" drop back guy that throws it, in from the pocket. And those guys aren't really developed anymore because the college offense is really utilizing quarterback run a lot, period. It's just that's how it is. So if you don't like the fact that this is the wave of what's going on in the NFL, then I guess you can watch NFL films and continue to watch, teams and the way they played in the 70s and the 80s and wax poetic about Franco and Rocky. But that's just not how they play anymore. It's just not. And when you hear Art Rooney talk about, well, I still believe, we get back to running the football, you're missing the boat altogether about what wins in the NFL. Even I'll tell you another team you throw in there, Washington. One of the things about Washington is they let that kid run. And so he was able to run. They did RPOs. They were able to, throw the ball down the field. He rolled out. He did a bunch of stuff because they had an offensive coordinator and head coach that were committed to, let's try and modernize our offense to the way that you have to in the NFL so you can score enough points to win games. It's a big play league. It has been for a long, long time. It's a big play league, whether it's running the ball or passing the ball. And so when I hear Art Rooney talking about, well, when I get back to running the ball, I know what he means. He's waxing poetic about the way they won in the 70s. And even, early 2000s when they had Jerome Bettis and, Ben Roethlisberger was young and he handed the ball off a bunch to Willie Parker. And that's not how you play anymore. So My thing is, the first thing the Steelers have to do, okay, is get a quarterback. We know that. If it's going to be Justin Fields, make it Justin Fields. But if you're going to go that route, you have to completely sell out to the idea of we're not going to play old school football. We're going to play football the way it's played and take advantage of what Justin Fields does really well, which is run the ball, which is be exciting player, which is be somebody who teams would have to game plan against. His ability to run, his ability to move back in the pocket, to make plays on the run. That's what it costs. And the thing about it is, I keep hearing people, well, he's a one-read guy or he's a two-read guy. If you run the right offense, guess what? He only needs one or two reads. That's the point. That is exactly the point. And that's what I don't think they're asking Jalen Hurts to do a whole lot in the pocket. Jaden Daniels, they weren't asking him to do a whole lot in the pocket. Josh Allen has developed over time, but early in his career, they weren't asking him to do a whole bunch of stuff in the pocket. Lamar Jackson has developed over time. They weren't asking him to do a whole bunch, and they still were able to win a bunch of games and score a bunch of points. You can't be afraid of your quarterback running the football. And I think the Steelers are in some ways. It's just ridiculous. And so I feel like, there's so many different ways you look at it, but I get tired of people trying to compare the Steelers to the Eagles. Well, look, the Eagles, look where they're at, and they run the ball. They've got the exception, and the exception is a guy that can go 70 yards pretty much anytime he touches the ball, and he's the ultimate weapon. There isn't that kind of guy out there. We use the phrase generational player way too often, but Saquon Barkley is in a class by himself. I mean, period. He's a guy that really is just completely dominating the game because he's a better football player than pretty much anybody else out there on the field with him. That guy doesn't necessarily exist. And that brings me to this second point. I keep hearing people, that want to move on from Najee Harris. Okay? They want to move on from Najee Harris, which might be the right thing to do. But just like I did with quarterback, if you're going to move on from Najee Harris, where are you going? Who is available? That's better. That's a clear upgrade. I'm going to give you some names of the top free agent running backs on the market right now. Aaron Jones. Is that a big upgrade over Najee Harris? He's got 8, he's going into his 9th year. Probably not. Jeff Wilson. Is that an upgrade over Najee Harris? A.J. Dillon. Is that an upgrade over Najee Harris? Here's one interesting name, Nick Chubb. But are you really going to take a flyer on Nick Chubb, given, what's happened with his leg and everything else? I don't know if you're going to. I mean, I go down the list. One interesting name is J.K. Dobbins, but, I mean, is he really that much of an upgrade over Najee Harris, number one? And number two, and I think this is the other thing, can he stay healthy? That's the big thing. He's had a bunch of injuries in his career. I mean, I'm looking at all of these guys, and I'm saying to myself, Kareem Hunt, Cam Akers. I mean, I don't know that there's necessarily an upgrade over Najee Harris. Now, you can say, well, you could duplicate what he does in the draft. Okay, let's go to the draft. The Gente kid from Boise State is obviously the top-rated running back, really good player. He will not be on the board. I don't believe he will be on the board when the Steelers pick. And, of course, could you imagine the outcry, given what they need at receiver, if the Steelers drafted him in the first round, if he slipped all the way to 20? I don't think he will. But if he did, and he slipped all the way to 20, could you imagine the outcry if the Steelers drafted him? After him is the kid from North Carolina, Hampton. You've got Caleb Johnson from Iowa. You got the 2 Ohio State running backs, and Ollie Gordon from Oklahoma State. And we'll even throw in, kid Kiner from Cincinnati. Those are basically all considered top, 100, 110 type prospects. Any of those guys excite you? Again, I think when we talk about upgrading and getting better. You got to actually upgrade and get better. The quarterback spot we've talked about a lot. There isn't anybody out there, unless you really believe that Sam Darnold is that guy. There isn't anybody on the list right now of free agents who are better than the two guys the Steelers have. And that's especially true when you consider price and things of the such, because I think that you can get Justin Fields pretty cheap. Now, if Russell Wilson goes elsewhere, Justin Fields might have a little more leverage. Maybe he gets a little bit more money, but it's not going to be significantly a lot of money. You've got that, obviously. The second thing you have that I think is so important is that at running back, I think your best option might be to see if you can get Najee Harris to agree to something cheap. Not dirt cheap, but you don't want to pay him $10 million a year or $9 million a year even. But if you could get him to agree 3 years, $7 million a year, you might have to think about doing that because, again, I just don't know that there's anybody better on the market. I think that's the most important thing to remember. Yes, we want to replace this guy, but guess what? There's got to be somebody on the market that's a clear upgrade. And there's nobody on the market that's anywhere close to Saquon Barkley. There's nobody on the market that's anywhere close to that. Or the Gibbs kid from Detroit, or even Derrick Henry from the Ravens. There's nobody on the market close to those guys. And so if you're not going to get one of those elite superstar type running backs that can carry an offense, I don't know that you want to move on from Najee Harris because I think that, again, he might be your best option. Now, the price matters, obviously, because, again, I mean, you don't want to really overpay for him. But I think that, honestly, I don't think that he would cost that much money because I don't know that the market is there for him. I just don't. So I feel like, these are things that we talk about all the time, but nobody seems to want to acknowledge that. I look at the draft and I say, well, there's some interesting names and there's some guys that maybe can turn into good players, but I don't know that they are guys that are going to change the course of your team, period. Because I think if you look at the names, you say to yourself, boy, I just don't see anybody here that makes it really all that exciting. And that's really what it comes down to me. And here's the other part of it. Number one, as I talked about before, one of the things that makes the Eagles go is they've got the best offensive line in football. They're really, really good. That helps. But the other part of it is they've got Kellen Moore calling plays. And I think that, Sirianni has allowed him to, and obviously as a part of the team or whatever, as a part of the coaching staff or whatever, they have been willing to be really creative. They have been willing to put their heads together and say, how can we make this team that is built around, that doesn't have an elite quarterback? Because I don't think anybody would say Jalen Hurts is an elite quarterback, but they have a quarterback with a really good skill set that is capable of making plays and capable of doing things, that maybe some other quarterback can't do. He's also a tough, gritty guy. He's clearly a winner. I don't care what anybody says. The guy's a winner. I mean, he's got that gene where he goes out and he basically, will do whatever it takes to win the game. And you can always build on that. But to me, I think that they basically said, look, one thing he does really well is he will complement the running game. And as a part of complementing the running game, that means that we have to build an offense around his skill set. And the reason I bring that up is because that's another part of the equation that nobody really wants to talk about. But it's very clear that Arthur Smith is coming back. How do I know that? Because at the Senior Bowl this week, who's there? Tomlin, Omar Khan, Arthur Smith. I've had people say, well, maybe they're just making him work to the end of his contract. You don't bring a coordinator down to a scouting combine, pay all the expense to send him down there, have him evaluate players, and then you say, oh, by the way, we're moving on from you. He's there because they're evaluating players to see how they fit into what he wants to do. So at the end of the day, I'm looking at it and saying, he's coming back. The pipe dreams that you have of him leaving, he's coming back. And if he's coming back, why am I supposed to be excited about whatever's going to happen next year for the Steelers? I would really love somebody to explain it to me. Because you've now made it clear that you're not changing the head coach. And by default, that means you're not changing the defensive coordinator. You're not changing the offensive coordinator, which you still have the same philosophy. It sounds like you're going to come back with Justin Fields, which I guess is a little bit different than Russell Wilson. But here's the thing that is really frustrating. And I said this, at the middle of last year. You had Justin Fields playing. You were 4-2. And you were playing well, and he was getting better each week. You should have rode him to the end to find out what you had in him. Because you knew what you had in Russell Wilson. And to me, if as long as Justin Fields continued to win games, what you needed to know at the end of this season is what you really have truly in Justin Fields. You didn't know that because you didn't play him after the first 6 weeks. So now you go back now, if you bring him in and you put him in, and guess what? He's not what you think he is. You've now basically wasted yet another year in search of a quarterback. And so now you've got to go back to the drawing board. And I'll tell you, he'll be good enough that they'll win 9 or 10 games or whatever, just because that's, sort of what they do. And then again, you're going to be picking 20, 21, 22, which means you're not going to have a chance to draft your quarterback. But you've wasted another year. And probably it means also that you signed him for 2 or 3 years, which means you're kind of stuck with him. So to me, by not making a definitive move, not making a move that you needed to make to see what you had in quarterback, not being willing to say, I'm going to look down the road here. And, if we only win 9 or 10 games, it is what it is, but at least we will have built something for the future. By going with Russell Wilson, I got to be honest with you, you are now in a place where you basically are in the same exact situation you were last year. And if you get Russell Wilson and you decide to sign him for a 2-year deal, which I don't think that's the way they're going to go. I mean, reading Jerry Dulac and Ray Fittipaldo and all the other guys that cover the Steelers, it sounds like they're going to sign Justin Fields and Russell Wilson will be the Raiders quarterback. So if they sign Justin Fields, it means they need to go find another guy. We've already talked about all the guys that are out there on the market. The reality is they're not bringing in somebody that's going to be a legitimate threat to be a starter. So you're essentially hitching your wagon to Justin Fields. Now, he's got that skill set. No matter what you want to say, he's got that skill set. Like some of the quarterbacks we're talking about. But do you have an offensive coordinator that's willing to try and build his offense around that skill set? And do you have a head coach that's going to be willing to say, you know what, I'm going to let my philosophy go a little bit, and I'm going to get out of my comfort zone, and we're going to run a different kind of offense that probably I want. Because make no mistake about it, as I've said many times, I know he's younger and, he wears the cross and he uses the jargon and he knows all the rappers and all the other stuff, and he's a player's guy. And the reality is Mike Tomlin is maybe like a little bit hip and cool, which he is. I mean, he's cool. I mean, there's no question about it. I wish I was as cool as him. But when it comes to his philosophy of football, it's rooted. I mean, he's Chuck Noll, basically. It's rooted in another time or place. And he's very conservative. He wants to be very conservative. They want to play football in a way that, they don't make too many mistakes, and they, play defense and make teams go the long field. And, this whole, I call it the Dave Wannstedt philosophy, which is, any drive that ends in a kick is a good drive. That's him. That's Mike Tomlin to a T. That's what the problem is. I mean, I don't understand how, I don't know how many different ways I can say it, but that is what the problem is. And so to me, I think it's really important to know that it doesn't matter any of this unless he joins modern day football, A, and B, he either gets rid of Arthur Smith and brings in somebody who understands it and wants to run it the way that it needs to be run, or right, he gets Arthur Smith to change the way that he's going to play. One or the other. It's not going to work any other way. Period. It's never going to work any other way. And so, When I saw yesterday that Arthur Smith was down at the Senior Bowl, I was like, okay, what are we doing here? Like, there's no changes that are going to be made. None. There's no significant changes that are going to be made with this team in this offseason. And, I hate the phrase because it's a little bit of a cliche, but the definition of insanity is what? Doing things the same way over and over and over and over again and expecting a different result. That's what the Steelers are doing. That's what they've done for the last 3 or 4 years. And I really thought this year, when they lost in the playoffs again, when they lost 5 in a row, when they, tailed off at the end of the year, when they played the better teams and they lost because they're not able to play at that level, right? I really thought that this might be the year where they decided enough is enough. And we're going to operate a little differently. And we're going to make some legitimate changes. But right now, let's talk about what are the changes they can make to get better, just like we spent the last 20 minutes talking about. What are the changes they can make to get better? They could change the head coach. They're not going to do it. They could change the offensive coordinator. They're not going to do it. They could be bold and trade, I guess, up into the top 5 and try and get one of the 2 quarterbacks in the draft. They're not going to do that. They're going to have the same running back, the same, basically, the same top receiver. Are they really going to make an upgrade at running back to a point where it makes a difference? Probably not. I mean, it's the same story every single year. All I'm saying is you can't do the same things over and over and over and over again and expect it to be different. You just can't. Period. And I think the Steelers want that. And they think they can do that. But the reality is they can't. And so those are the things that are concerning to me. Because, again, when I hear people talk about, well, they could become the Eagles, they run the ball. It's just not going to be enough. Anyway, the game is always on at Archie's. Get down to Archie's on Carson Street. Archie's is the home of 80-cent wings Monday through Thursday, home of the Paul Zeise grilled cheese sandwich. So get down to Archie's, and when you get there, say hello to Archie. Game's on all the time. Pitt, North Carolina tonight. Big game for actually Jeff Capel and company. They have to win this one tonight if they really want to continue on their march to an NCAA tournament bid. It's a big, big game for them. So you go to the game or go down to Archie's and watch it at Archie. On a different front, before we get out of here, the Pirates made another big move. I mean, you want to talk about depressing in this town. I will say, I think last night the Penguins losing to San Jose and falling, I think they have the worst record now in the Eastern Conference. I think there's going to be some movement there where they finally say, we've got to do things differently now. We're holding on to a pipe dream that this core of players we've had that won a couple of Stanley Cups and all that stuff. I think they're finally going to make some changes. The Steelers, we've already talked about, probably not. The Pirates, you want to talk about depressing. When I saw that they signed today Adam Frazier, I mean, first of all, great kid. I mean, he's not even a kid anymore. A really nice guy, really good dude, good ambassador for the team. Always, a real easy guy to deal with in the media. But Adam Frazier, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I mean, the guy played for the Pirates in 2016. I'm looking at his resume. He's a journeyman. And again, they have all these one-year deals they sign these guys to. How about take all of that money, pull it together, okay, and go sign a real player? And that's not Adam Frazier will play hard. He'll give you everything he got. He's a utility guy that can play 3 or 4. I get it. But how about stop signing these guys and go out and actually sign somebody that actually can help you win? Because, again, there's a very defined window for winning over the next 3 or 4 years with Paul Skenes. Go get guys that can help you win. Anyway, tomorrow we'll be back at our normal time at 5. I'd like to thank you, and, of course, thank the county commissioners of Venango County for letting me use their office so I can get this done here. But until tomorrow, enjoy your time, enjoy your day, and stay warm. This has been This has been the big show, we call it, and we always have a good time when.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.